Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on resilient living. Thank you for taking time out of your busy afternoon to join us. We appreciate it, and we hope you find our talk today informative and enjoyable. If you need any help during our webinar, please use the chat pane in your meeting panel, which is over on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see a little section called chat that you can drop down, and you're welcome to send me a private message if you need assistance with anything. My name is Erin. And also, we definitely encourage you to submit any questions for our presenter to answer during our Q&A session at the end of the talk. So if there's anything that comes up during her talk that you'd like to know more about, any questions about resilience or anything related, please submit them. We'd love to answer those for you live at the end of the call. I'm going to start our presentation by introducing our speaker, Dr. Delvina Miramati. Delvina has over 8 years of experience specializing in resilience education and program development. Dr. Miramati received her Master of Education from Harvard University in Human Development and Psychology, where she conducted research at Harvard's Laboratory for Clinical and Developmental Research. Dr. Miramati completed her doctorate at Simmons College, focusing her research on academic resilience in higher education. She's currently directing and developing innovative resilience programs for colleges and universities. Dr. Miramati previously worked for Children's Hospital of Boston's Department of Psychiatry, developing innovative prevention tools and curriculum for the Swensrud Depression Prevention Initiative. Her expertise and passion lie in the creation and implementation of health promotion and prevention programs that address student issues, including mental health, resilience, and various everyday wellness needs. So with all of that said, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Miramati. Welcome.
Thank you, Erin. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be invited here today to present to you. And I'm excited to share a little bit about resilience and hopefully provide you with some helpful tools that you can take with you and apply to your life from here on out. And I think especially that given it's the holiday season, I know we're all experiencing some additional added stress. And today, I think this topic of resilient is really relevant. And what it's going to allow us to do is take this idea of stress or life's challenges and really look at it through a new lens of realizing your resilience. So instead of the usual kind of focus on the stressful event or the negative stressor, we're going to focus on the actual positive characteristics, the various skills and tools that will help you foster resilience that will then buffer against those stressors. So again, it's really a focus on, those positive elements rather than kind of the negative stressors. So today's presentation, I'm actually going to ask a little of you to do some work. I'm going to ask you to participate in the presentation through a little bit of reflection, and at the end we'll practice a couple of relaxation techniques. So given this topic and given the fact that resilience will mean something a little different to all of you, it will be important that you do engage in this participate in the presentation as we go along. So today we'll start by examining your current internal and external resilience. We'll spend a little time exploring opportunities to nurture your resilience and point out some pitfalls that could occur. And hopefully all of the skills and tools and knowledge you'll learn will then be something you can take with you and really expand your life and your resilience. So to begin, we want to think about, what, why, and how when thinking about resilience. So, our lives are all full of really exciting and rewarding events. However, we also inevitably are going to encounter a lot of challenging and stressful events as well. This could be, anything from a relationship challenge to a death of a loved one, or perhaps a conflict in your job or the loss of a job, really anything that you can struggle with from time to time, or perhaps this time of year. It could be more of a daily stressor that, has to do with the holiday season, family obligations, or financial strain. So thinking about all of those kind of negative things that can happen or challenging events that we know will come up, this concept of resilience is really exciting because it allows us to really take a unique opportunity to explore our ability to cope with challenges in new ways. So rather than focusing on that negative event, resilience provides us a new lens to see kind of the positives that could come of those. So commonly, we address stress by focusing on the vulnerability of a person who doesn't have the capacity to bounce back from a stressor. So there's a psychological theory you may have heard of. It's known as the diathesis stress model. And this model explores the interaction between the traits and the environmental stressor as they relate to the negative outcome. For example, depression or anxiety. This is a common approach in the world of psychological theory, and an example, I guess, to bring this idea to light is really just thinking about mental illness in general. The focus on understanding mentally ill is understanding what's wrong with people instead of seeking to understand healthy people and trying to identify how they maintain their mental stability despite their encounters with the same adversity. Again, what's exciting about resilience is it really allows us to ask new questions. For example, we want to look at what are the characteristics, what are the skills and the resources that contribute to a person's strength rather than their vulnerabilities. What allows them to be flexible and provides them the ability to bounce back from adversity after experiencing an adverse event. And why is it that people generally have the capacity to cope and adapt over time, and how do they do that? So we're going to answer some of those questions throughout this presentation. We'll start by just answering the basic question of what is resilience. Resilience is a very complex concept, and it's been defined in multiple ways over the years. It's a term that's thrown around quite frequently. It's quite trendy these days and probably has been something you've heard spoken of, whether you're at work or even in your personal life at home. This idea of resilience oftentimes talking about children, perhaps. So it can be used in a variety of contexts, and depending on the context, it may carry a different definition or emphasis. But what we're going to do for the sake of this presentation is really look at all the definitions that are out there and pull together the most important aspects of what make resilience a unique and significant concept for us to talk about. So to start, resilience is a dynamic process. I mentioned that, but it involves the interaction between both risk factors and protective factors, and these factors can be both internal and external. So even just right there, we're talking about some complex aspects of resilience. So to clarify a little bit, when I'm speaking of an internal protective factor, that could be something like problem-solving skill. So it's an internal skill that one person possesses that can help protect them. A risk factor that's an internal factor could be low self-efficacy. So that could be an internal factor that one possesses or doesn't possess that could make them vulnerable when experiencing a negative event. An external protective factor would be something like community belonging. So a sense of belonging or connection to their community can be a really significant external protective factor. And then a risk factor that's external could be a lack of healthy peer relationships. So those are just some examples to clarify what we're talking about when we use the term internal and external factors or protective factors or risk factors. Okay, so resilience is ordinary and not extraordinary. Research has shown that people commonly demonstrate resilience, so it's well within the grasp of everyone to build their resilience. Resilience is not a trait that people either have or don't have. So it involves behaviors and thoughts and actions that can be learned and developed in anyone at any point in time in their life. And lastly, fostering resilience means something different to each person. So it's personal and specific for each individual. We all have our individual strengths and vulnerabilities, and therefore each of our capacities for resilience need to be nurtured and fostered in different ways. So this is a critical point to make for this presentation, and it's why I said earlier that I'm going to ask of you to do a little work to actively participate throughout the presentation, because by you reflecting and making the content your own, it'll be more effective for you and hopefully serve as a more useful tool to apply to your life. Lastly, just before I move on, I just want to make a note that another important piece to resilience is a person's culture, and that can have an impact on their overall resilience. So cultural differences do cause variation in things like communication or interactions. An example could be the expression of love or perhaps conflict resolution within the family dynamics. So all of those create differences in what resilience may look like from person to person. So just keep that in mind throughout the presentation. Some of the content due to your cultural background may need some adaptations to really meet your needs, but all of the content can be adapted, and feel free to adjust it so that it makes sense to you as we move along. So why is resilient an important concept for us to all understand? We previously talked a little bit about how resilience buffers or helps moderate the negative effects of stress. But what's really important is that it also promotes positive adaptation. So we'll never be able to stop or eliminate our exposure to extreme stress or risk factors. But what resilience does is it really sheds light on the positive adaptation and deals specifically with the experience of establishing equilibrium, which is referred to here in the slide as bouncing back despite exposure. So resilience, by doing this, really helps us focus on the qualities or mechanisms which protect us and provide new ways for us to learn and grow, to come out of a situation stronger and more resilient than we were before we actually encountered the negative situation at all. So it works in two ways, and both of those ways are extremely beneficial. Another way of just thinking about it in placing it in your life is that why it's important is, one person who is resilient may experience the same stressful event, while a non-resilient person who experiences that same stressful event won't have the protective mechanisms in place to buffer the effect, and therefore they'll have a more negative outcome than the person who's resilient. So now that we have a better understanding of what we mean when we use the word resilience, I want to just take a few minutes to talk a little bit about what resilience means to you, and reflect and examine your own personal capacity for resilience. So in order to do that today, I want to think about your own capacity for resilience using this model. It's the characteristics triad. It really helps create a framework for a more holistic examination of all aspects of your life that can contribute to your resilience. So the dispositional factors are the individual's inherent characteristics that ultimately contribute to their positive adaptation. The familial factors are the characteristics of your family experiences that allow you to adapt and thrive. And the environmental factors are the characteristics of the individual's environment that provide and support the resources needed to thrive. As you'll notice, I'm talking specifically here about the protective factors and not the risk factors within these different domains. Given that we're here to realize our resilience and wanting to use the resilient lens, it's important to really concentrate on the protective factors and try to build those up as much as possible and foster those within yourself, since the outcome of doing that will be that it will buffer against the negative risk factors and therefore have a more positive experience. So given this model here, I'm just going to ask you a few questions. Take a moment and listen and think about as I kind of read through these. You don't have to do anything on paper at this moment or anything. Just kind of listen and try to reflect, and we'll delve a little deeper into your own experience. So are you committed to your lifetime goals? Do you feel a purpose in life, a compelling reason to get out of bed in the morning? Do you feel driven to succeed? Are you committed to your religious or spiritual beliefs? Do you speak to your family often, sharing life experiences, both positive and negative? Do you have family members who provide love and support in times of need? Do you have a role model who offers encouragement and support? And lastly, does your environment provide activities you enjoy doing? Does your environment support your values? Does your environment include a variety of healthy and supportive relationships? So those were just a few questions, examples of questions you can ask to elicit the process of trying to identify the factors in your life. So just take a moment and jot down some thoughts about these questions within these areas of your life. And try to focus on the protective factors, the positive factors that remain in these areas. As you do this, think about, are there areas there where there seem to be gaps? Does one of the three areas pose more challenging for you? Is one of the areas seem to be the strongest? Perhaps you have more protective factors or in one than you do the other two. So as you do this, I also want to note that as you're reflecting, we're going to practice being resilient. And being resilient means that you're optimistic, you're able to look at these gaps and these areas of risk as temporary rather than permanent, and realize that they're unrelated to other areas of your life. So resilient people don't view these as failures or negatives, but rather opportunities for growth. So that's what we want to do today. We want to take a look at our protective factors and try to evaluate where perhaps there are opportunities for us to grow, opportunities for us to improve and foster more resilient living. So with that, I think we'll move on, but also just try to keep in mind throughout the webinar that that's how we're going to try to, that's, I guess, your task for the rest of the webinar, is to try to maintain this positive image of positive thinking, this outlook where anything that is difficult for you is actually an opportunity for growth, and we'll hopefully be able to uncover and explore ways to improve that. So we've talked about the factors that contribute to perhaps your life, but let's take a look at, according to research and theory, what they say a resilient person will looks like. So we're going to look at, because of the way we break it down, external and internal, we're going to spend a little time talking here about this slide, which is looking at the external factors associated with resilience. And we'll also take a look at some of the internal factors. And so as we go through this, think about your list and perhaps add more or take away anything. You can use this to adjust what we just did in your reflection, and try to build a more complete model for yourself. Many studies show that one of the most critical components of living a resilient life is having supportive relationships and friendships. So both family and peer relationships are a critical component to being resilient. Um, Also, a strong sense of belonging to your community and being active in civic, faith-based, or local groups can provide some additional social support and really help bolster a person's resilience. Looking at the internal factors associated with resilient, we'll talk about, resilient people, they take care of themselves. They make their own health and well-being a priority. They're optimistic and they learn from their mistakes. So they think positively about the future and they view failure as an opportunity to learn and grow. They choose how to respond. They have the capacity to manage strong feelings and impulses so they can choose how they respond. So again, they have a control over their emotions and their thoughts in a way that will allow them to respond rationally, which is another one, thinking rationally, having the capacity to problem solve through realistic, rational thinking and action. They maintain perspective when they're under pressure, and they consider the stressful event in the broader context. So they don't blow things out of proportion. They're able to really see the event for what it is. And lastly, they believe in themselves. So they keep a positive view of themselves and they have confidence in their strengths and abilities. So high self-efficacy, self-esteem, and self-confidence. So given kind of all of that, now we have a picture hopefully in front of you that depicts kind of what your protective factors may look like. We've identified what it is that are the for resilient people. So if somebody is resilient, what are the key factors? While we didn't probably cover all of them, the most critical in both the external and internal according to research and theory. So given that we know all that information now, it seems, like it could be just plug and play, right? We've identified why we need to be resilient and how we need to be resilient, so we'll just be resilient. However, it's easier said than done and doesn't necessarily work that way, mostly because there are a variety of things that can get in the way of our resilience. One of these, which is the most common and actually one of the most damaging, is negative thinking, and this can really impede our capacity for resilience. So I'm assuming that by saying negative thinking, it's something that we've all experienced throughout our life. However, we don't spend as much time really thinking or changing how we think about those what we do with those negative thoughts and thinking. So I wanted to just spend a minute to really break it down to make it a little easier, hopefully, to understand and make changing our negative thoughts easier and more easier for you to be able to do in the future. So when we experience a stressful event, it's likely that our reaction to that event is going to be a negative emotion or a strong feeling. And so, you could be really critical of your work. You could receive some constructive criticism from somebody else and take it, to really hard and assume that you failed at the project or you don't believe in your abilities to do it any better. So you have those thoughts, so you experience this negative thinking, but what happens is it's not just a passing thought that you then are able to get out of your head, move on, and continue on a positive path towards, thinking more positively and getting better. What usually happens, not always, but usually, is that this negative thinking turns into negative self-talk. And once those thoughts enter your brain and turn into negative self-talk, they often linger and they repeat for long periods of time. So if anybody's experienced self-talk, you'll understand what I'm speaking of when in how it, snowballs and really can lead to a much stronger sense of hopelessness, anxiety. It's also negative self-talk is a significant factor in people who are suffering from depression. So as you can imagine or see, the negative internal dialogue can be extremely harmful to your life, your personal relationships, and work productivity, performance, and just your overall quality of life. So it really is up to us to acknowledge this as an issue, and really work towards making improvements. And I'm happy to say there are many ways to do this that we're going to talk a little bit about today. So first, let's start by identifying some types of negative thinking. So negative thinking habits could be, there are a variety of them, and these are just a few examples, but mind reading. So this is one variation of a cognitive distortion, and this could be you walking down the hallway at your work and you wave to a coworker, and that coworker doesn't wave back or maybe just walks by, and you think in your head, oh no, they don't like me. What did I do wrong? Was it because of what I said in the meeting last week? You really start to have some of those cognitive distortions where you predict why they did that, when actually the behavior could just be that they didn't see you wave. And so, they didn't wave back because they didn't see you, and it's as simple as that. The catastrophizing, so you turn one small incident or mistake into a much larger issue, focusing on really the worst case scenario. So part of that leads into the example I just gave as well, where you really think of what is the worst case scenario and you harp on that. Overgeneralizing, so that's really letting the negative outcome of one event extend into other areas that are otherwise unrelated. So perhaps something that happens at work that makes you feel like maybe you failed, or you're disappointed in your productivity or your work, and you kind of, that maybe brings up some things that happened at home, and then you start thinking about your relationship with your spouse and something that's going on there, and somehow this one little small issue that was completely work related has now stemmed into you thinking you're unworthy or failing at your relationships at home. The negative view, so this is, just having a really negative view of yourself, of the world, of what's going to happen in the future, and they're often inaccurate perceptions. Your unrealistic guilt, feeling like everything's your fault, feeling apologetic all the time. And polarized thinking is another example. This is when, there's kind of that always never thinking, it's, all or nothing, where a person really tends to think in extremes. So this is a really great tool that is a good reminder to really help you kind of identify when you have some of those negative thoughts. Sometimes I think you'll find once you reflect, you don't even realize that those are the things that you're thinking and saying to yourself. So, the nasty trap is a helpful tool to try to remember, to key into that. Are you saying, I'm never going to get that promotion? I always mess up in relationships. I should have known that. How could I be so stupid? I don't want to do this presentation. If I do, I know I'm going to mess up and embarrass myself. Things will always be bad, so why bother change? So these never always should have total disaster and why bother are part of the nasty trap. So just try to pay attention the next time you're experiencing some uh, event and pay attention to the thoughts and some of the self-talk that's going on with you. So once you pay attention and you realize, oh, I guess I do have some negative self-talk going on. I need to work on that. What are you going to do? Um, one effective way that is helpful is to really think of your brain as a roadmap. So, we all experience life based on the different pathways available to us. And the different roads available to us. Our behavior is often reflective of, taking that same road over and over again. That it's, one that's been constructed over time. It's based on life experiences and learned behaviors. And it's usually something that becomes quite automatic and an automatic reaction to something that's going on externally. Um, it's comfortable, it's familiar, it's automatically it's how we react to specific situations. So using this thinking of the roadmap, it's really easy to see how we get stuck in those same old nasty habits or nasty thinking. Um, and it's also a good way to see the opportunity here. So don't be discouraged, because if you think of your brain as a roadmap, it also means that there are thousands of new possibilities and roads left untraveled. And the way that we do go about doing this is known as cognitive restructuring. So what we want to try to do is really reframe that negative thinking. So cognitive restructuring really helps you focus on the moment immediately following the obstacle, and it helps you build a new pathway option, so a new road. It allows you the opportunity to build new roads and experience more positive outcomes, right? So we're going to try new things, try to take new roads, and practice those roads so that they can become more automatic, like the more faulty thinking or destructive roads did. So the key behind cognitive restructuring is that our moods are really driven by what we think and what we tell ourselves. So our negative thinking and self-talk creates a negative mood and a negative outcome. So it's a behavioral technique that's associated with cognitive therapy, which has been found to be most successful form of therapy for dealing with problems of anxiety and depression. And it's been really effective in those areas of really changing and restructuring and reframing the way that we think about the way that our thoughts work, and especially in times of distress, having the ability to really control that process is really effective. So when we're able to really change our thinking, we can approach the challenges of life in a new way. We can feel confident, rational, have a more optimistic perspective, because we know we have the tools that we need to really approach the situation in a positive way. So again, working on new thinking patterns. You are going to experience a negative event, and following that negative event, it's helpful to just stop for a moment, take a deep breath, and acknowledge your emotions, but don't forget to think. So again, we're not saying you're never going to have negative thoughts that are going to lead to, a negative feeling, disappointment, sadness. Those are all, completely normal and part of the process. But what you want to do at that point is really pay attention to the negative thoughts and feelings that are becoming destructive and not allowing you to then move on to the next step, which is moving in the direction of finding a solution. So pay attention to any of those nasty negative thinking patterns that are going to creep in, the never, the always, failure. And at that point, really make a choice to take control. So you want to ask yourself, What can I learn from this situation? What are the positives? What is the short and long-term impact? And just by asking those three questions, you're really pulling in a lot of what we discussed before of what a resilient person has or is or does. So, for example, what can I learn from this situation? You're taking a negative event and you're thinking about um, whether it was can be viewed as a failure, whatever. It's something you're going to learn from. There's always something to learn and grow from a difficult situation. What are the positives? So you're taking an optimistic perspective and you're not letting those negative thinking patterns get the best of you. You're acknowledging them and certainly I'm sure feeling them. However, there are positives to consider and at least throw into the mix as well. And lastly, what is the short and long-term impact? That really helps you take back control, think about rationally, kind of what is the situation and how does it impact your life. So practice positive thinking. This is another helpful tool. To really get those negative thoughts out. It's not going to be easy, and one of the ways you can do it is just try to really practice these positive thoughts. And oftentimes it feels funny at first because it's not as natural to be positive in negative situations, but really try to keep these in mind, whether you make a list or keep it on your desk. But just try to repeat these to yourself. And actually, it works to do this just every day, even if you don't feel like you're going through a difficult time or experiencing stress. And that way, kind of as we discussed, that pathway or that road will be well traveled and easy to access in the event of a crisis when at times it's a little more difficult to stop and think rationally. So you want these tools to be well practiced and easily accessible. So start problem solving. Again, problem solving is a great protective factor, and it really is a skill that people who are resilient have mastered. So you want to do this by defining the problem, translate it into a work in progress with goals. So oftentimes thinking about it as though you're not trying to identify one solution right now, the ultimate, solution, that it's going to take a while to identify a solution and perhaps multiple solutions, and that it is a work in progress. Um, so generate alternative solutions for each small goal. So you want to, set small goals and identify solutions for achieving each of those goals along the way. Evaluate and select solutions. Make sure you have options too. Having as many, starting with an open mind and how to approach the situation first, and then take a look at what all the possibilities are and pick the best. Sometimes you jump into a solution right away and you eliminate the opportunity to ever consider all these other alternative solutions that could have been more effective. And lastly, put it into place and see how it goes. Mindfulness. So being mindful, body of research over the past 20 years has really shown that mindfulness is helpful in reducing stress, and it's been an important component in a variety of psychological therapies. So being mindful, simply put, is, I guess, being aware and present in the moment. So it's about forgetting the past and the future and really making a conscious effort to pay attention in a non-judgmental way um, to the moment that you're experiencing, and also not rushing towards fixing something. So this is something you'd want to implement before you get to the problem solving step or process. It's really about just experiencing the moment. So you want to allow things to just be as they are in order to see them more clearly and figure out the best way to respond. And it's also really lets you get more joy out of a good experience, right? Because you're not on automatic pilot. You don't just have something good happen and say, oh wow, that was great, and move on to the next. You really get to sit in the moment and really feel the joy from that. And it also provides you an opportunity to deal more effectively with unpleasant experiences. So you can see the unpleasant experience, be in that moment, and not rush into all the negative thoughts or catastrophizing, and just really see it for what it is and figure out what it means for you to make that situation better. Again, also, what we're trying to do with the negative thinking can be so habitual and automatic that being mindful also contributes to not, um, sorry about that, to not having that automatic negative thought kind of creep in unexpectedly. Learning to relax. So relaxation is, I think, a challenge for most people, but it's really important and can be really effective in helping you cope and just live a healthier life. And relaxation really means something different to everybody. So for some, it could be yoga, others it could be journaling, um, exercise like running, or going to the gym. Some people just need alone time, just to sit quiet maybe and not have the experience of being with people all the time. So for everybody it's a little different, but it's important and something you should definitely consider identifying what works best for you, so you have that in your toolbox to pull out in time of crisis, because it's not something you can just never have done a deep breathing exercise before. When you're experiencing some stress, it's hard to just all of a sudden start deep breathing and think the effect is going to be what it should be. It's something you want to practice on a regular basis. So with that, I think we're going to end with just a couple of relaxation techniques. I thought it'd be helpful to, walk through a couple of them and practice a little bit. These exercises appeal to different senses, and therefore different people will have individual preferences for what they like most and what makes them feel the most comfortable. So my suggestion is just to give each one a try, see which one is the right fit for you. Um, with all exercises, they require practice over time, as I mentioned, and we can practice briefly now, but definitely try them on your own and take this with you and try to practice when you can. So we'll start with the deep breathing exercise. Most people, when they're not concentrating on their breathing, they tend to take quick, shallow breaths. This kind of breathing can make your heart rate beat faster. It can make you feel anxious. So when you take deeper breaths from your abdomen instead of the shallow breaths from your chest, your heart rate slows down and you'll feel more relaxed. So I'd like for you to get as comfortable as you can, either sitting in your chair or on the floor. Just get as comfortable as you can. Put one hand on your abdomen and really concentrate on taking deep, slow breaths. So what you can feel your abdomen going in and out. Sometimes it can help to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. So just take deep, slow breaths. You might want to try counting to yourself as you breathe in and out. You can also repeat a word to yourself each time you take a breath, like strong or calm. Take a few moments right now just to practice taking breaths in and out. So you're not going to feel a big impact right now, right away, but as you practice this, you will start to feel your body relax. Then a breathing exercise takes practice. Um, but just a few minutes every day when you're feeling calm, and then get used to it while you're feeling calm, and that way when you are feeling stressed, for example, right before a big presentation, it'll be a tool you can utilize. So the last visualization, the last exercise is a visualization imagery exercise. This can be really helpful when you're feeling stressed to picture or visualize yourself in a place that feels relaxing and peaceful to you. So this could be the beach or your favorite room in the house. Um, it could be a place that you've dreamed of but have never been to. So when you construct this picture in your mind, right, the more senses you use, the stronger the image, and therefore the sensation of relaxation will be much stronger as well. So choose a relaxing scene. Think of the most relaxing place you've ever been. The place can be real or it can be imagined. So for example, it could be a beach or it could be a castle in the clouds. There are no right or wrong answers. You just want to use your imagination. When you've chosen your place, take a piece of paper and write a script of the scene using all your senses. So sight, sound, touch, smell, taste, temperature. Describe the scene in full detail using the first person. So I'm standing on a balcony with the ocean waves below me. It's warm. It smells like salt from the sea. So now choose a word or phrase that will help you recall the scene. For example, ocean or my relaxing place. And what you're going to want to do, and this is all happening a little quickly, but once you've spent some time creating your list, what you want to do is try to memorize what you've written. So when you practice, you don't have to refer to the paper. Um, and then what you've written down in your scene and choose your cue phrase. Um, and so that's what you'll use to practice. So the phrase you've chosen will cue that list, and you'll really begin to be able to imagine this place. So as you become more confident in this imagery technique, try using it during the course of your day. You know, practice during a break or on your way to work. It's a great tool because you don't need anything except for your mind. And sometimes, you know, it's really helpful just to sit back and enjoy some of relaxation, and can be anywhere, you know, and nobody really knows you're doing it. And so just to finally kind of summarize everything that we talked about, you know, this idea of realizing your resilience is really an ongoing experience of, you know, thinking about the words related to realizing, you know, comprehending and grasping and recognizing, and that resilience is an ongoing process. You're never resilient or not resilient. Resilience is something that you could be having a very resilient life, and that doesn't mean that every day you can become more resilient. So always seeking new ways, learning, taking, you know, new opportunities to become more resilient, and certainly, you know, unexpected stressful life events happen, and being able to learn from those and become more resilient following those is what is most important. So I guess I'll just end by saying that we all have the capacity to really enhance our lives and foster our resilience so we can bounce back and hopefully live each day better than we did the day before. I think at this point in time, I'm happy to take any questions that may have come up during the presentation. I hope you found it all very helpful.
That was great. Thank you so much, Dr. Miramati. We hope that everyone enjoyed her excellent presentation and got something from all of the great exercises and different learnings that she provided for us. We did have a couple of questions come in during the presentation, so we'll start with those. And then if anyone else has one they'd like Delvina to answer live on the call, please put them in your chat panel over on the right-hand side of your screen, and we're happy to get those answered for you. Okay, so Delvina, the first is I can be very hard on myself, but I've always felt like this made me try harder and ultimately do better. Is this actually hurting my resilience?
No, I think there's that brings into the topic of, wanting something to be perfect versus understanding, that your best work can still have some mistakes or errors to it and being able to accept those errors without being hard on yourself. So I think having standards to do your best is certainly a good thing. Um, but being hard on yourself is usually, it follows the work you've um, produced. And so it's not necessarily beneficial being hard on yourself because it's kind of after the fact. You've already done your best and created your best work. And so being hard on yourself after the fact doesn't seem to make a big difference. So trying to change that to thinking more positively would, I think, help you feel more resilient and try to have a more resilient perspective on the work that you're doing.
Excellent, thanks. Our next question says, I actually feel fairly resilient, but are there things that might happen that would decrease my resilience?
Resilience is, if you think about it, I think like if you think of it as a toolbox and you have all these skills and as we talked about protective factors and those protective factors, you have them, they're part of your life, and they're going to help you be resilient. As you encounter difficult situations, it's accessing those tools and utilizing them to become resilient or overcome that challenge. But those tools and skills, it's kind of like once you have them, um, you can overcome any challenge without, you're not going to lose them just because you're utilizing them or experiencing a really difficult situation. So, no, a really stressful event isn't going to decrease your resilience. However, it's going to require that you maybe utilize all of your tools in order to get back. So it might take you longer, or you might have a little more difficulty because of the severity of the situation. But you have the tools, so as long as you're utilizing them, you'll continue to be resilient.
Great, thank you. Our next question says, I like the idea of trying to think more positively. I know I need to do this. Do you have other recommended exercises that I can work on?
Yeah, one that I find really helpful, and I think it depends on the situation specifically that is difficult for you, but I think in general, if every day you wake up and write, three positive things that you'd like to have happen that day, and then maybe at the end of the night, write three positive things that did happen that day and try to just keep a running list of, I think the morning list is helpful in keeping that mind frame, start your day off wanting to have that positive perspective and really to try to take action and living a more positive life. And then at the end of the day, providing you some time to reflect. And if it seems like at the end of the day it's hard for you to think of three positive things, you'll realize, okay, maybe, there's I need to do some more work here because I'm not able to do that. So that would be, I guess, just a first exercise in helping you figure out what it is that you want to be more positive in and how to kind of use reflection to really look at what's going on for you.
Excellent. That's a great recommendation. Our next question is, do you have suggestions about how I might foster healthier relationships?
Um, so I think one really key element to healthy relationships is really kind of a common interest and a common value, having, common values, morals, and interests. And so one thing you might want to do is think about areas in your life, or perhaps starting to be involved in places that would foster relationships that would provide that for you. So it could be an organization or something out in the community, or perhaps a group of friends that you know have a common interest, or a book club. And I think finding groups of people that have those commonalities with you, the morals, the values, and those interests, will really help you, make connections with people that will provide that supportive relationship that enhances your life, as opposed to just a network relationship.
Great, thank you. And we have one more question and then we'll wrap up. Says, you spoke about the importance of having a purpose in life. I'm not sure that I know mine. How do you go about finding it?
So that's a great question. I think, oftentimes people think of the purpose in life as kind of this one big goal, and they're always trying to identify or seeking their purpose. And I find it helpful to think about your purpose in terms of, um, I think we all have multiple purposes, and I actually think being mindful, using that skill, can help you identify kind of what your purpose, or multiple purposes may be. And one helpful tool might just be to think about all of the areas in your life, the positive elements. Look at that list of the protective factors and think about the people, the relationships, the connections that you have, the personal characteristics and traits. And I think just kind of mapping all of that out will help you identify the different connections and places in your life that provide you purpose that you may not even be considering at the time.
Perfect. That was a great note to end on. So I'd like to thank everyone for their time, everyone who participated. We greatly appreciate you spending an hour with us and all of the really excellent, insightful questions. And Dr. Miramati, thank you for such an excellent presentation. I hope everyone has a great afternoon.